She had walked this path 1,000 times in her dreams, draped in silk, crowned with orange blossoms, her future sealed by a promise made before she could speak. But as Gwendolen stood at the altar of St. Margaret's Chapel, the cold marble beneath her feet and the colder gaze of the Marquis of Ashford before her, 3 words whispered from behind shattered everything. "You deserve better." She turned, and in that single forbidden glance at a stranger's storm-grey eyes, the life she'd been promised began to crumble. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you're hearing this story. I want to know how far it has travelled. Victorian England, 1878. The morning fog clung to the windows of Thornfield Manor like ghostly fingers, obscuring the manicured gardens beyond. Inside the grand drawing room, Gwendolen Hartley sat rigid in her chair, her spine pressed against the velvet upholstery as her mother adjusted the lace at her collar for the 3rd time that hour. "You must look impeccable, Gwendolen," Lady Hartley murmured, her voice tight with anxiety. "The Marquis arrives this afternoon to finalize the wedding arrangements. This union has been planned since you were born. Everything depends upon it." Gwendolen's reflection stared back at her from the gilt-framed mirror across the room, a young woman of 22, with hair the color of burnished copper and eyes like spring moss. Beautiful, they said. Accomplished. The perfect bride for one of England's most powerful noblemen. Yet as she looked at herself, she saw only a portrait being prepared for auction. The marriage contract between the Hartley and Ashford families had been signed 22 years ago, when Gwendolen was but hours old. Her father, then a prosperous merchant seeking to elevate the family name, had negotiated the arrangement with the old Marquis of Ashford. The terms were clear. Gwendolen would marry the heir, securing the Hartley family's position in society, while providing the Ashfords with fresh capital to maintain their crumbling estates. She had never questioned it. How could she? From her earliest memories, her entire existence had been shaped toward this single purpose. Her education focused on the arts a Marchioness should master: watercolors, piano, French conversation, household management. Her friendships were carefully curated from families of appropriate standing. Even her reading materials were selected to prepare her for life as a peer's wife. "He is a distinguished gentleman," her mother continued, smoothing invisible wrinkles from Gwendolen's day dress. "Handsome, wealthy, titled. Many young ladies would envy your position." Gwendolen knew the facts by heart. Marcus Ashford, the current Marquis of Ashford, had inherited his title at 25, following his father's death. Now 30, he managed vast estates across 3 counties, sat in the House of Lords, and moved in the highest circles of London society. His family lineage stretched back to the Norman Conquest. He was, by every measurable standard, a triumph of a match. Yet Gwendolen had met him only 5 times in her entire life, each encounter carefully chaperoned and formal. She remembered a tall man with fair hair and pale blue eyes that seemed to look through rather than at her. He spoke little, asked her no questions about her thoughts or interests, and treated their impending marriage as one might regard a business merger: necessary, predetermined, unremarkable. "Do you think," Gwendolen ventured softly, "that he might come to care for me? In time?" Lady Hartley's hands stilled. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Sadness, perhaps, or regret. But it vanished quickly, replaced by practiced brightness. "Affection grows from companionship, my dear. You will be companions for life. That is more than many have." It was not an answer. Gwendolen had learned not to expect them. The afternoon brought the Marquis as promised. Gwendolen watched from her window as his carriage, bearing the Ashford coat of arms, rolled up the drive. Marcus descended with mechanical precision, his movements economical and devoid of warmth. He wore his status like armor: perfectly tailored coat, gleaming boots, expression of aristocratic indifference. The meeting in the drawing room proceeded with choreographed formality. Marcus greeted Gwendolen's parents, discussed estate matters with her father, and acknowledged Gwendolen with a brief nod. When he finally addressed her directly, it was to confirm the wedding date. June 15th, he stated, not asked. The ceremony will be held at St. Margaret's Chapel in London. The Archbishop will officiate. I trust these arrangements are satisfactory. Of course, my lord, Gwendolen replied, the words automatic. Good. His gaze moved past her to her father. The settlements are in order? As the men discussed financial details, Gwendolen studied her future husband. She tried to imagine loving this remote, glacial man, tried to envision passionate conversations, shared laughter, tender moments. The images wouldn't form. Instead, she saw years of formal dinners, separate bedchambers, and polite indifference stretching before her like an endless corridor. Gwendolen will make an excellent marchioness, her father was saying. She has been prepared for this role her entire life. I have no doubt. Marcus's tone suggested he had given the matter no thought whatsoever. The Ashford name requires a wife of impeccable breeding and deportment. Miss Hartley meets these requirements. Requirements, as though she were a piece of furniture being evaluated for a room. Later, as Marcus prepared to depart, he requested a private word with Gwendolen in the garden. Under her mother's watchful eye from the window, they walked the gravel paths in silence until Marcus stopped beside a marble fountain. I want to be clear about expectations, he began, his tone businesslike. As my wife, you will manage the household, appear at social functions when required, and provide heirs. In return, you will want for nothing materially. I am not an unreasonable man, but I value order and discretion above all else. Gwendolen's throat tightened. And what of companionship, my lord? We shall be cordial. He examined his gloves rather than her face. I have my interests. You will have yours. Many aristocratic marriages function excellently on such terms. I see. She didn't, not really. But what could she say? That she'd dreamed of more, that the romantic novels she'd secretly devoured promised something beyond this cold transaction. Is there anything else you wish to discuss? Marcus asked, already turning toward his carriage. No, my lord. What would be the point? He departed without a backward glance, leaving Gwendolen standing alone beside the fountain. The water's endless circulation suddenly seemed a metaphor for her life, moving constantly while going nowhere, trapped in an endless, predetermined loop. That evening, as her maid helped her undress, Gwendolen caught sight of her reflection again. The same copper hair, the same moss-green eyes. But something inside felt different, a small, rebellious stirring she couldn't quite name. It whispered dangerous questions. Was this truly all life could offer? Was duty more important than happiness? Did she have any choice at all? She silenced the whispers quickly. Of course she had no choice. The contracts were signed, the announcements made, the future sealed. In 3 months, she would become the Marchioness of Ashford. She would be grateful, dutiful, and resigned. And yet, as she lay in bed that night, watching moonlight paint silver patterns on her ceiling, Gwendolen felt the weight of her gilded cage more heavily than ever before. June 15th dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect summer day that seemed designed for weddings. London sparkled in the morning light as carriages began arriving at St. Margaret's Chapel, depositing guests in silks and satins, feathered hats and polished top hats. The cream of English society had come to witness the union of the Hartley and Ashford families, a spectacle as much as a ceremony. Inside the bride's chamber, Gwendolen stood motionless as her attendants made final adjustments to her gown. The dress was a masterpiece. Ivory silk overlaid with Brussels lace, seed pearls gleaming at the bodice, a train that seemed to stretch for miles. Her veil, held by a diamond tiara borrowed from the Ashford family vault, cascaded around her like morning mist. You look like a princess, breathed her cousin Eleanor, adjusting orange blossoms in Gwendolen's hair. Gwendolen smiled weakly. She felt like a sacrifice being adorned for ritual. Her mother appeared in the doorway, resplendent in violet silk, her expression a mixture of pride and something that might have been pity. It's time, darling. Your father is waiting. The walk to the chapel seemed both endless and far too short. Gwendolen's hand trembled on her father's arm as they paused at the great doors. Through the opening, she could see hundreds of faces turned expectantly, the vast space overwhelmed with white roses and trailing ivy, and at the altar, standing rigid in his formal attire, was Marcus. The organ began its triumphant announcement. The doors swung fully open. "Remember," her father whispered, "you are doing your duty to this family. I am proud of you." They began the long walk down the aisle. Gwendolen's vision narrowed to tunnel-like focus, one foot in front of the other. Breathe, smile, don't think. Marcus's face remained expressionless as she approached. When she finally reached the altar steps, her father placed her hand in the Marquis's. Marcus's palm was cool and dry, his grip perfunctory. The Archbishop began the ceremony, his voice rolling through the chapel with practiced authority. Gwendolen heard the words as though from a great distance. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." She was acutely aware of the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, the pressure of Marcus's hand, the constriction of her corset making each breath an effort. This was it, the moment her entire life had been building toward. In minutes, she would be bound forever to this cold stranger beside her. "If any person here present knows of any lawful impediment to this marriage," the Archbishop intoned, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The traditional pause followed, a mere formality everyone knew. No one ever actually spoke. But then, from somewhere behind her, a voice cut through the silence. "I do." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Gwendolen's heart stopped. Marcus's hand tightened painfully on hers. The Archbishop's face registered shock. Slowly, impossibly, Gwendolen turned her head. A man stood in the third pew, tall, dark-haired, with intense grey eyes that locked onto hers. She had never seen him before in her life. He wore the clothes of a gentleman, but carried himself with an unsettling directness that defied aristocratic reserve. "This is outrageous," Marcus hissed. "Archbishop, continue the ceremony." But the dark-haired stranger was already moving forward, his voice clear and unwavering. "The impediment, Your Grace, is that the groom is already married." The chapel erupted. Women gasped and whispered furiously. Men called out in confusion and anger. Gwendolen swayed on her feet, the world tilting. "That is a lie." Marcus's face flushed with rage. "Who is this man? Remove him immediately." "I am Dr. Edmund Sterling," the stranger announced, reaching the altar. His grey eyes found Gwendolen's again, and she saw something there. Urgency, compassion, determination. "And I can prove every word." The Archbishop raised his hands for silence. "This is highly irregular. Dr. Sterling, you make a grave accusation. What evidence do you present?" Edmund Sterling reached into his coat and withdrew a leather portfolio. 3 years ago, while travelling in Scotland, the Marquis of Ashford contracted a marriage with a young woman named Catherine Ross in the village of Gretna Green. I have here the marriage certificate, witnessed and registered, as well as testimony from the presiding minister. "Lies!" Marcus lunged forward, but 2 groomsmen caught his arms. "This is a conspiracy to ruin me." "Then you deny knowing Catherine Ross?" Edmund's voice was steady, relentless. "You deny travelling to Gretna Green in the summer of 1875? Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a flicker of panic quickly masked. That was a youthful indiscretion. It was annulled." "No annulment was ever filed," Edmund countered. "Catherine Ross, now Catherine Ashford, lives still. She carries your name, my lord, whether you acknowledge it or not." The chapel had descended into chaos. Lady Hartley had collapsed into her pew, requiring smelling salts. Lord Hartley was shouting demands for proof. Marcus's family members surged forward, some attacking Edmund's claims, others turning on Marcus with accusations of their own. Through it all, Gwendolen stood frozen at the altar, still wearing Marcus's ring, still dressed as his bride. Her mind struggled to process what was happening. Married? Marcus was already married. Every promise, every assurance, every plan, all built on a lie. Edmund Sterling suddenly stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "Miss Hartley," You deserve better than this. You deserve a life of your own choosing. This is your chance. Walk away." I don't understand," she whispered. "Who are you? Why would you—" "Because someone should have told you the truth." His grey eyes held hers with startling intensity. "You don't have to go through with this. You're free." Free. The word sounded foreign, impossible. Marcus broke away from his restrainers and grabbed Gwendolyn's arm roughly. "This changes nothing. We can resolve this quietly. The wedding will proceed." "It most certainly will not," the Archbishop declared firmly. "Until this matter is investigated fully, I cannot in good conscience perform this ceremony. Lord Ashford, you will need to provide documentation of any annulment immediately." "Let go of me," Gwendolyn heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant, but clear. She pulled her arm from Marcus's grip. "Don't touch me." For the first time since she'd known him, Marcus looked at her with something other than indifference. He looked frightened. "Gwendolyn, be reasonable. This is all a misunderstanding. We can—" "You lied to me." The words came slowly, each one a revelation. "You lied to everyone. I protected you from unnecessary complications. You used me." Her voice grew stronger. "You were going to make me your bigamous wife, humiliate my family, all while hiding the truth." The weight of hundreds of stares pressed down on her. She could see the shock on her mother's face, the rage on her father's, the gleeful scandal-mongering in the eyes of society matrons. Tomorrow, this would be in every newspaper. The Hartley name would be synonymous with shame. And somehow, impossibly, Gwendolyn felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. She turned to Edmund Sterling, this stranger who had shattered her life. "Is it true? All of it? Every word? I'm sorry you had to learn this way." "No, why?" The question encompassed everything. Why tell her? Why now? Why care? "What is Catherine Ross to you?" Edmund's jaw tightened. "She is my sister. Marcus seduced her, married her when she became pregnant, then abandoned her when his father demanded he return to make a more suitable match. She has been waiting 3 years for him to acknowledge her, while he planned to commit bigamy." The picture became hideously clear. Marcus hadn't just lied to Gwendolyn, he'd destroyed another woman's life entirely. "I'm sorry," Gwendolyn said softly to Edmund. "I'm sorry for what he did to your sister." "You have nothing to apologize for." Edmund's expression gentled. "But you should leave this place. Let your family handle the legalities. You don't deserve to be the spectacle." He was right. Already, guests were pressing closer, eager for more drama. Gwendolyn felt suffocated by the attention, by the weight of her ruined future, by the magnitude of her public humiliation. She lifted her chin, gathered her massive train, and walked. Not toward her father, not toward Marcus, but straight down the center aisle toward the chapel doors. Every eye followed her. Whispers rose like a storm, but Gwendolyn didn't stop. As she passed Edmund Sterling, their eyes met once more. He gave her the slightest nod, approval, perhaps, or respect. She burst through the chapel doors into brilliant sunshine, gulping air like a drowning person breaking the surface. Behind her, the chaos continued, shouting, accusations, scandal erupting in full force. And Gwendolyn, still dressed as a bride, veil streaming behind her, did something she had never done in her carefully controlled life. She ran. Gwendolyn fled London 3 days later, travelling north under cover of near secrecy to the Yorkshire estate of her father's elder sister. Aunt Beatrice Ashworth, no relation to Marcus's family, thankfully, was a widow of independent means and equally independent mind. She had attended the disastrous wedding and immediately extended an invitation for Gwendolyn to recover in the countryside, away from the vultures of town. The journey passed in a blur of rain-streaked windows and Gwendolyn's own churning thoughts. The scandal had exploded exactly as anticipated. Every newspaper from the Times to the Penny Dreadfuls carried some version of the story. Marquis's secret marriage exposed. Wedding day, catastrophe for prominent families. Bigamy, plot uncovered at altar. Her father had sent exactly one letter, its contents as cold as Marcus's hand had been. Gwendolen had embarrassed the family, damaged their standing irreparably, and should consider herself fortunate that Aunt Beatrice was willing to harbour her until the scandal died down. There was no sympathy for her humiliation, no acknowledgement that she had been the victim of deception. She was simply an inconvenience now. Ashworth Hall appeared through the mist like a haven, a graceful Georgian manor set among rolling hills and ancient oaks. Aunt Beatrice herself stood at the entrance, a tall woman of 60, with silver-threaded auburn hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Come inside, child," she said briskly, ushering Gwendolen into a warm sitting room. "You look half dead. Tea first, recriminations never." Over the following days, Aunt Beatrice displayed a remarkable gift. She neither pitied Gwendolen nor pressed her to discuss the disaster. Instead, she simply invited her niece into the rhythms of her own life. Morning walks through the gardens, afternoons spent reading in the library, evenings playing chess or discussing politics with a frankness Gwendolen had never encountered. "Your mother was always too concerned with propriety," Beatrice observed one evening as they sat before the fire. "She forgot that women have minds as well as manners." "She wanted me to be happy," Gwendolen offered weakly. "She wanted you to be secure," Beatrice corrected. "There's a difference. Security can be a prison, my dear. I should know. I married for it. Only after my husband died did I discover I had a self beyond being someone's wife." Gwendolen had never heard anyone speak so openly. "Do you regret your marriage?" "I regret I never questioned whether I had alternatives." Beatrice's gaze sharpened. "You've been given an unexpected gift, Gwendolen. Your life has been returned to you. Most women never get that chance. What will you do with it?" The question haunted Gwendolen. What would she do? She had no training for independence, no skills beyond those of an ornamental wife. Her reputation was tarnished. Her family wanted her hidden away. The future she'd been promised was ashes, and yet she was free. The realization came gradually, like dawn creeping over the hills. She could choose, not between approved suitors or permitted activities, but genuinely choose. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. 1 month after her arrival, Aunt Beatrice announced guests for dinner. The vicar and his scholarly son, recently returned from Oxford. Gwendolen nearly begged off, unready to face society, but Beatrice waved aside her protests. "The Reverend Blackwell has known you since childhood, and his son Edmund has specifically requested to meet you," she said. Then, noting Gwendolen's confusion, added with an enigmatic smile, "Edmund Sterling is the young doctor's Christian name. He took his mother's maiden name after his father, the late Reverend Sterling of Surrey, passed away. His mother remarried the Reverend Blackwell. Do keep up, dear." Gwendolen's heart stuttered. Edmund Sterling, the man who had destroyed her wedding and paradoxically saved her from it, was coming to dinner. She dressed with unusual care that evening, choosing a simple green dress that matched her eyes. As she examined her reflection, she realized she looked different somehow. The brittle perfection expected of Marcus's bride had softened into something more genuine. There was color in her cheeks from outdoor walks, and a thoughtfulness in her expression that hadn't been there before. When Edmund arrived, Gwendolen was struck anew by his presence. Tall and lean, with dark hair slightly disheveled and those remarkable grey eyes, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Unlike Marcus's aristocratic hauteur, Edmund's assurance seemed earned rather than inherited. "Miss Hartley," he bowed over her hand, "I'm grateful to find you well. Dr. Sterling." Her voice remained steady, though her pulse raced. "I never properly thanked you for what you did. You owe me no thanks. I only spoke the truth that should have been revealed long ago." Over dinner, Gwendolen learned Edmund's story. After his father's death, his mother had married the kindly Reverend Blackwell, who encouraged Edmund's passion for medicine. He'd studied at Edinburgh, then returned to establish a practice in York that served both wealthy and poor patients alike. "Edmund refuses to turn away anyone who needs help," Reverend Blackwell said proudly, "even when it means he's paid in chickens rather than coin." "Health isn't a privilege of the wealthy," Edmund said simply. "It's a human necessity." Gwendolen found herself leaning forward, fascinated. "That must be challenging. Financially." "It is," Edmund admitted, "but far less challenging than living with the knowledge that I turned away someone in need." She had never met a man who spoke of duty in terms of conscience rather than obligation. Marcus had performed his aristocratic duties with resentful efficiency. Her father fulfilled family responsibilities as business transactions. But Edmund seemed driven by genuine care for others. After dinner, Aunt Beatrice orchestrated matters so that Edmund and Gwendolen found themselves alone in the conservatory. The glass-walled room was filled with exotic plants, their fragrance heavy in the warm air. "Your aunt is subtle as a cavalry charge," Edmund observed with amusement. Gwendolen laughed, a real laugh, spontaneous and genuine. "She's been trying to resurrect my interest in life. I think she sees you as a particularly promising project. And is it working, your resurrection?" The question was serious beneath its light delivery. Gwendolen considered. "I'm beginning to think it might. I spent 22 years believing my life had one possible path. Now that path is gone, and I'm discovering there might be others." "There are always others," Edmund said softly, "though sometimes it takes devastation to see them." "Is that what happened with your sister, Catherine?" Edmund's expression darkened. Catherine believed Marcus's promises. When she became pregnant, he insisted on marriage. In Scotland, where it could be done quickly and privately. He promised to announce their union once his father approved. Instead, he returned to London, claimed the marriage never happened, and left her alone with their child. "There's a child." Gwendolen felt ill. A daughter, 18 months old. Marcus has never even seen her. The cruelty was staggering. Gwendolen thought of her own narrow escape. She would have been the second wife, her children illegitimate without even knowing it. "How did you discover he planned to marry me?" "I've been investigating Marcus for months, trying to gather proof for Catherine to claim her rights. When I learned of your wedding, I realized I couldn't let him compound his crimes. I'm sorry it required such public exposure, but there was no other way to stop it in time." "I'm not sorry," Gwendolen said firmly. "You saved me from a terrible mistake. More than that, you gave me a choice when I didn't even know I was entitled to one." Edmund's grey eyes held hers with unexpected intensity. "You were always entitled to choose, Miss Hartley. Society simply convinced you otherwise." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Gwendolen couldn't name. Then Edmund cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should go, but I wonder, might I call on you again? If you're staying in Yorkshire, I'm nearby in York. We could, that is, I'd like to continue our conversation." "I'd like that very much," Gwendolen heard herself say. As Edmund departed, Aunt Beatrice materialized beside Gwendolen with a knowing smile. "That young man has substance. Rather different from your cold Marquis, wouldn't you say?" "Entirely different." Gwendolen watched Edmund's carriage disappear into the twilight. "Aunt Beatrice, what would you say if I told you I don't want to return to London? That I'd like to stay here, perhaps find some meaningful occupation?" "I'd say it's about time you started living for yourself." Beatrice squeezed her hand. "And I'd say that a certain doctor would be very pleased to hear it." That night, Gwendolen lay awake, thinking not of the disaster she'd escaped, but of the possibilities stretching before her. Edmund Sterling had opened a door, not to another predetermined path, but to genuine choice. And for the first time in her life, Gwendolen felt eager to discover where that choice might lead. Over the following months, Gwendolen's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. She remained at Ashworth Hall, where Aunt Beatrice introduced her to a circle of progressive thinkers, reformers, educators, writers, and medical professionals who gathered regularly to discuss everything from women's education to public health initiatives. It was a revelation. In London society, Gwendolen's opinions had never been sought. Women discussed fashion, social gossip, and household management. But in Beatrice's circle, she found herself debating the merits of various charitable approaches, learning about the conditions in York's factories, and discovering that her own thoughts were not only welcome, but valued. Edmund became a regular visitor. He invited Gwendolen to observe his work at the clinic he'd established in York's poorer districts. There, she witnessed medicine practiced not as elite privilege, but as essential service. She watched Edmund treat factory workers injured on the job, children suffering from preventable diseases, and elderly patients abandoned by wealthier physicians. "You have such patience with them," Gwendolen observed one afternoon, as Edmund finished examining a young mother's sickly infant. "They deserve patience," Edmund replied, carefully writing out instructions for treatment. "Most have no education about health, no resources for proper care. The least I can offer is time and respect." Gwendolen found herself returning to the clinic regularly. At first, she simply observed. Then Edmund taught her basic tasks: preparing bandages, organizing medicines, comforting frightened children. She discovered an aptitude, and more importantly, a passion for the work. For the first time, she felt useful rather than merely ornamental. "You have a gift for this," Edmund told her one evening as they walked back to where her carriage waited. The autumn air was crisp, and York's medieval walls glowed in the setting sun. "Patience, trust you. That's not something that can be taught." "I never imagined I could do anything like this," Gwendolen admitted. "My entire education was designed to make me a perfect aristocratic wife. And now you're making your own purpose." Edmund stopped walking, turning to face her. The warmth in his grey eyes made her breath catch. "You're remarkable, Gwendolen. I hope you know that." The use of her Christian name thrilled through her. Over months of working together, they'd grown close, but this felt like crossing a threshold. "Edmund," she said softly, testing his name on her tongue. "Gwendolen." He smiled, and she realized how much she'd come to care for that smile. "I have something to tell you. The London Medical Society is hosting a symposium in December. They've invited me to present my research on public health interventions. I've been avoiding London since the wedding, but I think it's time." "That's wonderful. Your work deserves recognition. I was hoping you might consider attending, not as my nurse or my colleague, but as—" He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "As someone important to me. I know returning to London will be difficult for you, but you've changed so much these past months. You're not the frightened bride anymore. You're strong, confident, purposeful. I think it's time London saw who you've become." Gwendolen's heart raced. The thought of returning to London terrified her. The gossip, the judgment, the inevitable encounter with her family, or, worse, with Marcus. But Edmund was right. She had changed. She'd discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed. Why should she hide, as though she were the one who'd done something wrong? "Yes," she said decisively. "I'll go with you." Aunt Beatrice was delighted. "Excellent. We'll attend together. Make it a proper outing. And you'll need new clothes, of course. Not morning dress, despite what your mother might prefer, but something that shows you're vibrant and alive." The weeks leading to the symposium passed in a flurry of preparation. Gwendolen helped Edmund refine his presentation, their evening discussions, blending professional collaboration with increasingly personal connection. The boundary between colleague and something more blurred gradually, naturally. One evening, as they reviewed his notes in Beatrice's library, Edmund suddenly set down his papers. "I need to say something," he began, his characteristic confidence wavering. "These months with you have been— Gwendolen, you must know that my feelings have developed beyond friendship. I understand if that's unwelcome, given everything you've been through, but I can't continue without telling you the truth." Gwendolen's pulse thundered. "Edmund, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I'm not Marcus. I won't make promises I can't keep or hide who I am. I'm a physician with a modest income and work that will never make me wealthy. I can't offer you estates or titles, but I can offer honesty, respect, and a partnership where your voice matters as much as mine. If that's something you might want." She had dreamed of this. Not the specific words, but the feeling behind them. Marcus had offered her requirements and expectations. Edmund offered her choice and equality. "I do want that," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I care for you, Edmund, more than I knew I could care for anyone. You showed me I was capable of more than being ornamental. You gave me purpose and respected my mind. How could I not?" He kissed her. Not the formal, perfunctory kiss of aristocratic engagement, but a kiss full of genuine feeling, tender, passionate, and completely overwhelming. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless. "I should apologize," Edmund murmured, though he didn't look remotely sorry. "Don't you dare!" Gwendolen laughed, joy bubbling up unstoppable. "I've been hoping you'd do that for weeks." December brought their departure for London. Gwendolen wore a striking dress of deep emerald silk that transformed her moss-green eyes into jewels. With her hair arranged in a sophisticated style and her bearing confident, she looked every inch the accomplished woman she'd become, not the broken bride who'd fled months ago. The Medical Society's symposium was held in a grand hall in Bloomsbury. As Gwendolen entered on Edmund's arm, with Aunt Beatrice trailing regally behind, she felt dozens of eyes turn toward her. The whispers began immediately. "That's Gwendolen Hartley, the failed wedding. She looks well, considering." What's she doing with that doctor?" Gwendolen lifted her chin and smiled. Let them whisper. She had nothing to be ashamed of. Edmund's presentation was brilliant, a detailed analysis of how improved sanitation and accessible medical care could dramatically reduce mortality in working-class neighborhoods. Gwendolen watched him command the room with quiet authority, saw the respect in his colleagues' faces, and felt profound pride. During the reception following, she noticed a commotion near the entrance. Her stomach dropped as Marcus strode into the hall, accompanied by a blonde woman Gwendolen vaguely recognized from London society. "What is he doing here?" Edmund's voice was tight with controlled anger. Marcus's eyes found Gwendolen across the room. His expression shifted through surprise, calculation, and something that might have been regret. He began moving toward them. The blonde woman, Gwendolen now remembered her as Lady Charlotte Pemberton, a notorious social climber, clinging to his arm. "Miss Hartley," Marcus said stiffly when he reached them, "I hadn't expected to see you in London." "Why wouldn't I be in London, Lord Ashford?" Gwendolen's voice was cool, controlled. "I have every right to attend public events." "Of course." His gaze flicked to Edmund with barely concealed hostility. "Dr. Sterling, still interfering in matters that don't concern you?" "My sister's welfare concerns me greatly," Edmund replied evenly, "as does justice, which you've managed to evade thus far." Charlotte Pemberton tittered. "Oh, is this that scandalous doctor? Marcus, you didn't tell me he'd be here? How thrilling!" "This is hardly entertainment, Lady Pemberton," Gwendolen said sharply. "Dr. Sterling exposed a crime that would have ruined my life. I'm grateful to him." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It was a misunderstanding. Catherine and I had a brief, informal arrangement that she misinterpreted. The whole scandal was unnecessary." "You married her," Edmund said, his voice dangerously quiet, "before witnesses with legal documentation. That's not informal or misinterpreted. It's binding law." "That's been resolved," Marcus waved dismissively. "I've provided financial compensation. She's agreed to quietly dissolve the matter." Gwendolen stared at him in disgust. "You bought her silence. I provided for my mistake." Marcus's facade of control was cracking. "Unlike some, I take responsibility for my errors. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "No." Gwendolen surprised herself with the firmness of her voice. "You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. You planned to make me an unwitting participant in bigamy. And you abandoned your own child. You don't get to walk away pretending you've behaved honorably." Charlotte's eyes widened with glee at the drama. Others in the reception were beginning to notice the confrontation, moving closer to listen. Marcus's face flushed. "You should be thanking me. I released you from an obligation you were clearly too weak to fulfill. Look at you, consorting with a common physician, working in slum clinics like some charity volunteer. You've proven you were never suited to be a Marchioness. You're right, Gwendolen said clearly. I was never suited to be your wife. I'm far too good for that role. The surrounding guests gasped. Edmund's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Marcus looked genuinely shocked. The Gwendolen he'd known would never have spoken so boldly. You've changed. I've improved, she corrected. I discovered I'm capable of far more than being a decorative wife to a man who sees women as property. I have purpose, skills, and someone who values my mind as much as my name. She smiled up at Edmund. I'm happier than I ever would have been with you. For a moment, something almost like regret flickered across Marcus's face. Then it vanished, replaced by cold disdain. Enjoy your little rebellion, Miss Hartley. When you tire of playing nursemaid to the poor, you'll discover how limited your options truly are. He stalked away, Charlotte hurrying to keep up, leaving Gwendolen trembling with adrenaline. That was magnificent. Aunt Beatrice appeared at her elbow, beaming. Your mother would have fainted. I'm so proud. Edmund pulled Gwendolen aside, his expression serious. Are you all right? That was brutal. I'm perfect, Gwendolen realized with wonder. For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself. I chose my own path and defended it. Edmund, I'm not afraid anymore. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart soar. Neither am I. Gwendolen Hartley, I love you. Completely, wholly, without reservation. Will you marry me? The room seemed to fall away. Around them, London's society buzzed with scandal and judgment. But Gwendolen saw only Edmund's grey eyes, full of honesty and hope. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. This time, when they kissed, Gwendolen knew she was choosing freely. Not duty or obligation or family expectation, but love. Real, honest, transformative love. And it was worth everything. The announcement of Gwendolen Hartley's engagement to Dr. Edmund Sterling created, predictably, another wave of scandal. But this time, Gwendolen found she didn't care. The gossip columns could print what they liked. She was marrying for love, on her own terms. And no amount of societal disapproval could diminish her joy. Her family's reaction was less surprising than it was disappointing. Her mother sent a brief, cold letter stating that the family would not attend the wedding and that Gwendolen was making yet another spectacle of herself. Her father's communication consisted of a terse note informing her that her modest dowry, which had been preserved after the Marquis debacle, would be released to her immediately, as he wanted no further connection to this embarrassment. They may come around eventually, Aunt Beatrice said gently as they read the letters together. Or they may not, but you're building a new family now. That proved prophetic. When Gwendolen finally met Catherine, Edmund's sister, she found a young woman of quiet strength and dignity. Catherine lived in a modest cottage on the outskirts of York with her daughter, Emma, a cherubic toddler with Marcus's fair hair and Catherine's gentle brown eyes. I'm so sorry for what you endured, Gwendolen said during their first meeting. If I had known... You would have been another victim, Catherine interrupted gently. Marcus was always skilled at manipulation. I don't blame you, Miss Hartley. I blame him as I should. Please call me Gwendolen, and I hope we can be friends. Sisters even, when Edmund and I marry. Catherine's smile was warm. I'd like that very much. Planning the wedding became an exercise in joy rather than obligation. Unlike the grand, orchestrated spectacle that had been arranged with Marcus, Gwendolen and Edmund designed a ceremony that reflected their values. It would be small, intimate, held at the village church near Ashworth Hall. Only people who genuinely cared for them would attend. No society matrons evaluating my choice of flowers, Gwendolen said with satisfaction. No competing with other families for ostentation, just people we love, and who love us, Edmund added, kissing her temple. That's all that matters. 2 weeks before the wedding, Gwendolen received an unexpected visitor. A carriage bearing an unfamiliar crest arrived at Ashworth Hall, and from it descended a distinguished elderly woman in elegant mourning attire. She introduced herself as the Dowager Marchioness of Ashford, Marquis's grandmother. "I apologize for the intrusion," the Dowager said once they were seated in the drawing-room, "but I felt I must speak with you before your wedding." Gwendolen braced herself for condemnation or some attempt to defend Marquis. Instead, the Dowager surprised her. "I came to apologize on behalf of my family," she said quietly. "What my grandson did to you, and to Miss Ross, was unconscionable. He was raised with privilege and no accountability, and I bear responsibility for that. His father indulged him, and I failed to intervene." "You're not responsible for his choices," Gwendolen said, though she appreciated the gesture. "Perhaps not entirely, but I want you to know that some of us recognize the injustice done to you." The Dowager reached into her reticule and withdrew an envelope. "This is for you, a wedding gift of sorts. It's a full written apology from the Ashford family, suitable for publication if you wish, and a settlement that ensures Catherine Ross and her daughter are provided for properly." Gwendolen opened the envelope with trembling hands. The documents were exactly as described: a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a trust fund for Catherine and Emma that would ensure their comfort for life. "Marquis fought this viciously," the Dowager continued, "but I control the family purse strings, and I insisted. That child is an Ashford, whatever the circumstances of her birth. She deserves support." "This is incredibly generous," Gwendolen managed. "It's the bare minimum of decency." The Dowager stood. "I wish you great happiness with Dr. Sterling. From what I've learned, he's a man of genuine character. You've chosen well, far better than my wretched grandson." As the Dowager's carriage departed, Gwendolen immediately sent word to Edmund and Catherine. Their joy over the settlement was tempered by the bittersweet reality that it had taken the grandmother's intervention rather than Marquis's conscience to achieve justice. "But it's done," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face as she held the documents. "Emma will never want for anything, and I can stop worrying about her future." "You should stop worrying about more than that," Gwendolen suggested impulsively. "Catherine, would you consider moving closer to York? Once Edmund and I are married, we'll be establishing a household there. I could use help managing things, especially as we expand his clinic, and Emma should have family around her." "Are you certain?" Catherine looked hopeful and hesitant in equal measure. "Completely certain. We're going to be sisters. Sisters should be nearby." The week before the wedding, Gwendolen made one final trip to London, not for society, but to collect her few personal belongings from her family home. Her mother refused to see her, but Gwendolen found herself unexpectedly ambushed by her younger sister Lydia, who had been away at school during the Marquis scandal. "I think you're terribly brave," Lydia whispered as she helped Gwendolen pack books and personal items. "Everyone says you're ruined, but you seem happier than I've ever seen you. And Dr. Sterling seems wonderful." "He is wonderful," Gwendolen confirmed. "Lydia, listen to me. Don't let mother and father plan your entire life. You have choices, even if they convince you otherwise." "Did you always know you had choices?" "No, I had to discover it the hard way, but you can learn from my experience. Whatever path you choose, make sure it's genuinely yours." Lydia hugged her fiercely. "I'll miss you." "I'll write," Gwendolen promised. "And you can visit us in York any time." Indeed, the night before her wedding, Gwendolen stood at the window of Ashworth Hall, looking out over the moonlit grounds. So much had changed in the 8 months since that disastrous day at St. Margaret's Chapel. She'd gone from a sheltered, dutiful daughter to an independent woman with purpose and passion. She'd discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed, and love she'd never imagined possible. Aunt Beatrice joined her at the window. "Nervous?" "Not at all," Gwendolen said honestly. "I'm excited. Is that strange?" "It's perfect." Beatrice squeezed her hand. "You know what you're choosing this time. That makes all the difference." "Thank you," Gwendolen said softly, "for giving me refuge when I needed it, for showing me what an independent life could look like, for everything." My dear girl, you did the hard work yourself. I just provided the space for you to grow. Beatrice smiled. Your mother might never forgive me for encouraging your rebellion, but I consider it my finest accomplishment. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. A crisp December morning with frost sparkling on the grass like scattered diamonds. Gwendolen dressed in a simple but elegant gown of cream silk, with no veil, no elaborate train, no diamond tiaras. Her copper hair was arranged naturally, woven with winter flowers. She looked, Beatrice declared, like herself, which is the most beautiful thing a bride can be. The ceremony at St. Mary's village church was everything the disaster at St. Margaret's had not been. The small congregation consisted entirely of people who genuinely cared. Catherine with little Emma, the Reverend Blackwell and his wife, Aunt Beatrice, several of Edmund's medical colleagues, and a handful of friends from York's reform circle. Even some of Edmund's patients had come, filling the back pews with cheerful smiles. As Gwendolen walked down the aisle on Aunt Beatrice's arm, she'd asked her aunt, rather than her father, to give her away. She caught sight of Edmund, waiting at the altar. His grey eyes shone with love and pride. There was no cold indifference, no sense of obligation, just pure joy. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Blackwell began, his voice warm, "we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two people who have chosen each other freely and with full hearts." This time, when the traditional question came, "If any person here present knows of any lawful impediment to this marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." Only warm silence followed. Edmund took her hands, his voice steady as he spoke his vows. "Gwendolen, I promise to honor your mind as much as your heart, to support your ambitions and celebrate your strengths, to be your partner in all things, in joy and in challenge. I choose you, freely and forever." Gwendolen's voice was equally clear. "Edmund, I promise to share your purpose and support your dreams, to be your equal partner and your greatest advocate. You showed me I was capable of choosing my own path. I choose you, freely and forever." When Reverend Blackwell pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was met with cheers and applause. As they walked back down the aisle together, Dr. and Mrs. Edmund Sterling, Gwendolen felt a completeness she'd never experienced before. This was what marriage should be. This was what love truly meant. The wedding breakfast was held at Ashworth Hall, a joyful gathering of conversation and laughter. Catherine gave a touching toast about second chances and new beginnings. Aunt Beatrice spoke about courage and the importance of choosing one's own destiny. Edmund's medical colleague, Dr. Harrison, ribbed him about neglecting his patients for romance. As evening approached and guests began to depart, Edmund and Gwendolen stood together in the garden, where, months ago, she'd walked with Marquis and felt only cold dread. "Happy?" Edmund asked, pulling her close. "Deliriously," Gwendolen confirmed. "Edmund, do you ever regret the scandal? Speaking out that day cost you professionally. Some of Marcus's influential friends have tried to undermine you." "I'd do it again in a heartbeat," he said firmly. "Besides, the controversy has brought attention to our work. More people are interested in public health initiatives now, and most importantly, it brought me you." "It gave me back to myself," Gwendolen corrected. "You gave me the courage to claim that self." "We gave each other something precious," Edmund said, "a future we chose ourselves." As the winter sun set over Yorkshire, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Gwendolen leaned into her husband's embrace and thought of the terrified bride she'd been 8 months ago. That girl had believed she had one path, one duty, one predetermined future. This woman knew better. She'd discovered that life offered infinite paths, and the greatest courage was choosing which one to walk, not for duty or expectation, but for authentic love and genuine purpose. She'd chosen well. Spring came to York with a riot of blossoms and renewed hope. Gwendolen stood at the window of the townhouse she and Edmund had established near his clinic, watching cherry trees rain pink petals onto the cobblestones below. 6 months had passed since their wedding, and her new life felt fully, vibrantly real. The clinic had expanded significantly. With Gwendolen's organizational skills and the settlement funds from the Dowager Marchioness, which Edmund had insisted partially support their charitable work, they'd been able to hire additional staff and extend services to more neighborhoods. Gwendolen managed the clinic's operations 3 days a week, discovering she had an unexpected talent for both administration and patient care. Mrs. Sterling, a young nurse, appeared in the doorway. "The Thornton family is here for their follow-up." Gwendolen smiled. The Thorntons, a factory worker, his wife, and 3 children, had come to the clinic months ago, with the youngest suffering from pneumonia. Edmund had treated her without charge, and Gwendolen had arranged for food and cold deliveries during the child's recovery. Now the entire family was healthy, and Mr. Thornton had found better employment with safer conditions. Small victories, Edmund called them, but to the families they helped, they were everything. That evening, Edmund returned from a consultation at one of York's wealthier households, their necessary income source that funded the charity work. He found Gwendolen in their cozy parlor, reviewing accounts with Catherine, who had indeed moved nearby and now managed much of the clinic's financial records. "How was Mrs. Pemberton Hughes?" Gwendolen asked with amusement. Edmund occasionally treated wealthy hypochondriacs whose imaginary ailments paid for real medicine for the poor. "Convinced she has consumption because she coughed twice," Edmund reported dryly. "I prescribed fresh air and fewer sweets. She paid handsomely for the advice she'll certainly ignore, but the money will buy vaccines for the children in Hungate," Catherine noted pragmatically, "so we're grateful for her hypochondria." As Catherine departed for the evening, she was attending a lecture on women's education, having developed her own intellectual interests since gaining financial security. Edmund and Gwendolen settled before the fire. "I received a letter today," Edmund said, pulling an envelope from his coat. "From the British Medical Association. They want me to present at their annual conference, a full session on public health reform in urban areas." "Edmund, that's wonderful." Gwendolen threw her arms around him. "Your work is finally getting the recognition it deserves." "Our work," he corrected. "The data on improved health outcomes comes from your meticulous record-keeping. You should co-present with me." "A woman presenting at the British Medical Association?" Gwendolen raised an eyebrow. "That would cause quite a scandal." "Let it," Edmund grinned. "We're rather good at scandals, as it happens." Gwendolen laughed, marveling at how much her life had transformed. The girl who'd been terrified of societal disapproval now actively courted it for worthy causes. She'd discovered that scandal mattered far less than purpose, and that the judgment of society held no power over a life built on genuine values. A few weeks later, Gwendolen made an unexpected visit to London, this time for pleasure rather than confrontation. One of her articles on public health education, she'd begun writing under Edmund's encouragement, had been published in a reform journal, and the editor wanted to discuss future contributions. Walking through London's familiar streets, Gwendolen felt like a ghost visiting her former life. She passed the townhouse where she'd grown up, the shops where she'd been fitted for her trousseau, the park where she'd walked with Marquis during their formal courtship. The memories felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else entirely. On impulse, she found herself outside St. Margaret's Chapel. The site of her greatest humiliation had become, paradoxically, the location of her liberation. She entered quietly, finding the vast space empty in the afternoon light. "Miss Hartley?" Gwendolen turned to find the Archbishop who had officiated, or rather failed to officiate, her wedding to Marquis. He looked surprised but not unkind. "It's Mrs. Sterling now, Your Grace," she said with a smile. "Ah, yes, I heard. Married to the young doctor who exposed Lord Ashford's duplicity." The Archbishop approached, his expression thoughtful. "I've often wondered about you, my dear. That day was most unfortunate. That day was the greatest blessing of my life," Gwendolen said honestly. "It felt like catastrophe then, but it freed me from a terrible mistake. I'm happier now than I ever would have been as Lady Ashford." The Archbishop studied her. "You've changed considerably from the frightened bride I saw last June." I've discovered who I am beyond society's expectations. That changes everything." "Indeed it does." He smiled gently. "I'm glad your story had a happy ending, Mrs. Sterling. So many don't." As Gwendolen left the chapel, she realized that was precisely what her life had become. Not the story written for her by family and society, but the one she'd chosen to write herself. A happy ending of her own making. Her final stop in London was unexpected. Standing outside the familiar townhouse, she debated whether to knock. Finally, she gathered her courage and rapped on the door. Her mother answered, surprise and confusion warring on her face. "Gwendolen, what are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Gwendolen said simply. "May I come in?" They sat in the drawing room where, a year ago, Lady Hartley had lectured Gwendolen about duty and appropriate behaviour. Now they faced each other as near strangers, an ocean of choices and consequences between them. "I'm not here seeking forgiveness or approval," Gwendolen began. "I'm here because you're my mother, and I wanted you to know I'm happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. My life isn't what you planned, but it's authentic and meaningful. I'm loved and respected. I do work that matters. I have purpose beyond being ornamental." Lady Hartley's facade cracked slightly. "Your father is still furious. The scandal damaged his business connections. His pride was damaged," Gwendolen corrected gently. "But, Mother, wouldn't you rather see me happy with a good man than miserable with a title? Didn't you ever want more than duty?" For a long moment, her mother sat silent. Then quietly, "I was 17 when I married your father. It was arranged like yours was to be. I learned to be content. I thought that was enough." "Was it?" "I don't know anymore." Lady Hartley looked at her daughter with something like wonder. "You're so different, so confident. I don't know whether to be proud or horrified." "Perhaps both," Gwendolen suggested with a slight smile. "I can live with that if you can." Her mother didn't embrace her or offer tearful reconciliation. But as Gwendolen departed, Lady Hartley touched her arm briefly. "I'm glad you're well, Gwendolen. Truly. It wasn't forgiveness or approval, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough." Returning to York felt like coming home. Gwendolen arrived to find Edmund at the clinic, treating a steady stream of patients. She rolled up her sleeves and joined him, falling easily into their practiced partnership. That evening they walked along York's ancient walls as sunset painted the sky in brilliant colours. The medieval stones beneath their feet had witnessed centuries of lives, loves and losses, triumphs and tragedies. Gwendolen thought of all the women who had walked here before her, most of them trapped by the expectations of their times. "What are you thinking?" Edmund asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That I'm extraordinarily lucky, and that I want to help other women discover they have choices too," an idea was forming. "Edmund, what if we expanded our work, not just medical care, but education for young women, practical skills, health knowledge, literacy? So many girls have no opportunities beyond marriage or factory work." Edmund's face lit up. "A school, attached to the clinic, or separate but connected. Catherine could help. She's passionate about education now, and Aunt Beatrice would certainly fund it." They talked long into the night, plans and possibilities unfolding. By dawn, the outline of something remarkable had taken shape. A school for working-class girls that would provide education without condescension, skills without servitude, opportunity without obligation. Months later, as they prepared to open the Hartley Sterling Institute for Girls' Education, Aunt Beatrice had insisted her name be included, Gwendolen received one final piece of news from London. Marcus, the Marquis of Ashford, had married Lady Charlotte Pemberton in a small private ceremony. According to the society columns, it was a subdued affair. No grand celebration, no triumphant spectacle. "Do you feel anything?" Edmund asked carefully, reading the announcement. Gwendolen considered. "Relief, mostly. Charlotte wanted his title desperately. They're suited to each other. And I suspect Marcus finally realizes that love and respect can't be demanded or purchased." Any regrets? None whatsoever. She took Edmund's hand, feeling the familiar warmth of his palm against hers. He taught me what I didn't want. You showed me what I could have. That's a valuable lesson. The school's opening day arrived with characteristic English drizzle, but it couldn't dampen the joy of the occasion. 15 girls, ages 12 to 16, arrived nervously that first morning. By week's end, they were animated and engaged, discovering that learning was exciting rather than intimidating. One girl in particular caught Gwendolyn's attention, a factory worker's daughter named Rose, bright-eyed and hungry for knowledge. She reminded Gwendolyn of herself at that age, though Rose had far fewer advantages. "Do you think I could really learn to be a teacher?" Rose asked shyly one afternoon. "Or is that foolish?" "It's not foolish at all," Gwendolyn said firmly. "You're clever and dedicated. Why shouldn't you become a teacher? The world needs more women like you in education, people who understand the students they serve." "But I'm nobody important." "Rose, I was raised to marry a Marquis and spent my life being important by association. It was hollow and meaningless. Now I'm important because of what I do and who I choose to be. That's real importance, and you have just as much capacity for it as anyone." Watching Rose's face light with hope and possibility, Gwendolyn thought of that terrified bride standing at St. Margaret's altar a year ago. She'd believed her life was ending. Instead, it had finally begun. That evening, as spring rain pattered against the windows and Edmund reviewed medical journals by lamplight, Gwendolyn sat at her writing desk, composing letters. To Catherine, planning curriculum improvements. To Aunt Beatrice, reporting the school's progress. To her sister Lydia, encouraging her to think beyond society's limitations. "Happy?" Edmund asked, looking up from his reading. Gwendolyn smiled. It was a question he asked often, and her answer was always the same: deliriously. But tonight she added something more. "Edmund, do you remember what you said at the altar? That day we stopped Marcus's wedding?" "I said several things." "Which ones?" "You deserve better." Those 3 words changed everything for me. They were the first time anyone suggested my feelings mattered more than duty. Edmund set aside his journal and came to kneel beside her chair. "You always deserved better, Gwendolyn. I'm just grateful you believed it. I believe it now, and I want every girl in that school to believe it about herself, that she deserves education, opportunity, respect and choice, that she can define her own path." "Then we'll make sure they do," Edmund promised. "One student at a time, one lesson at a time, one transformed life at a time." As Gwendolyn leaned into her husband's embrace, she reflected on the strange, circuitous path that had brought her here. A childhood promise had bound her to a cold, cruel man. A stranger's whisper at an altar had freed her. Courage and choice had led her to authentic love and meaningful purpose. The life she was living bore no resemblance to the one planned for her. It was infinitely better. Outside, the spring rain gave way to clearing skies. Tomorrow would bring new patients to treat, new students to teach, new challenges to overcome. But Gwendolyn faced it all with confidence, born of hard-won self-knowledge. She had been promised to a Marquis since childhood, trained for a life of aristocratic obligation. Instead, she'd become a doctor's wife, a clinic administrator, an educator, and an advocate for change. She'd bloomed exactly where she chose to plant herself, and she had never been happier. If you've enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. I love hearing how far these stories travel. Thank you for being part of this journey.